All right. So my name is Shayantika, and I'm finishing my dissertation on climate migration and indigenous women storytelling from contemporary India. And my keyword is migration. And for the next 11 minutes or so, I'm going to talk about migration in the context of the blue humanities. However, before I move forward, let me give you an interesting fact. So, migration or climate migration that I'm particularly interested in is not a legally defined or acknowledged term, at least according to the 1951 UN Refugee Convention. So from 1951 to 2026, we are still putting climate migrants in some sort of a legal limbo or a void because climate change induced migration or challenges are not considered grounds for any type of rehabilitation or protection. And this indifference towards the legally non-existing category of climate migrants also gets translated into other disciplines, for example, the environmental policymaking. So let me give you one example. So a few years ago, I was working with an NGO and I got really involved with a few environmental policymakers who were trying to define the term migration. So we talked about different kinds of migration, for example, the seasonal migration of the farmers, or migration driven by economic factors such as low employment or low wages. But when it came to defining climate migration, I was categorically told there is no reason to talk about climate migration. And because I was from Florida, I was actually given this example that every winter our northern neighbors end up in Florida because they are there in search for warmer climates. So we call them snowbirds. We have seen the memes on Facebook and Instagram, but we are glad that you're here. I know you're from New York. So I was asked, so do we call them climate migrants as well? I still today do not know how to respond to that question. And that motivated me in pursuing this question, who are climate migrants and how do we define the nuances of climate migration? My investment in climate migration is within a very specific category that I call water migrants. Again, not surprisingly, that is not a legal term or it hasn't garnered much prominence in academic discourse, not surprisingly, right? So my primary sources for my research are the oral history interviews or my fieldwork data from the interviews I conducted in India. For me, the water migrants, they usually come from marginalized or mostly indigenous communities. And these are the people who bear the brunt of anthropogenic or human-driven climate changes or climate change-induced water challenges, in which they have little to no control over. But unfortunately, they face the consequences and end up as the victims of forced migration or dislocation. And in my research, I try to understand how in this connection, the waters of the indigenous peoples are being contaminated, exploited, and even stolen from them. And when we talk about blue humanities in connection with the indigenous migrants, we have to consider the way the indigenous people interpret their waters, which is very different from how we interpret it, because our perspective on water is grounded in a very capitalist paradigm. For us, water is much like a capital, in a capital way, accumulated, profit-driven kind of a resource. But for the indigenous peoples, it's a life agent. It's a sentient and spiritual being, something that they deeply respect and they also take care of. And this is where I think the earlier point I was making about the connection between migration and blue humanities, it comes to full circle, because we cannot talk about the migration of the indigenous communities without first talking about how water socially, politically, and culturally shape their lives. Specifically now, they have become migrants. Because how do they redefine and reinvent their shifting role with the water now that they have become water migrants from the traditional knowledge keepers of water? I was trying to find answers to these questions during my field work. And one of the ways indigenous migrants find their way to the water is through memory making and by reshaping and reutilizing their traditional oral stories, mostly myth. That is how they kind of keep up with the dissonance of forced migration. Let me quickly throw in an example of an absolutely amazing graphic novel that I finished reading a few weeks ago. It's called Water, and it's by an indigenous artist, also a migrant from India. He belongs to one of the largest indigenous populations in India called Gond, Gond, and his name is Shubhas Vam. So he actually talks about his journey as an author, an artist, and a migrant in India, where he ended up from a village to the nearest city as a migrant worker. And he asks a very important question. Did we take more from the waters than what was due? The narrative moves back and forth between his village and the city where he ended up as a worker and had to trade his water, trees, and birds for a tiny flat where he gets access to the water through two large tanks. Um, and he talks about the village that used to be the lake in the village that used to be their only source of water, which got stolen from them in the name of modern developmental projects. Um, and that led to water scarcity and forced migration. And he carries this story forward in his artwork, which portrays two different worldview. The first one is the developmental worldview, which actually talks about the brutal consumption of water. And the latter highlights the sustainable use of water and the significance of differentiating between the human need and greed. I could go on and on and on because I'm writing my dissertation and I just wrote 30 pages on migration, the word migration. But I'll end my talk with an example that is closer to home, which probably will be able to give you some food for thought. So, in the year 2022, the indigenous populations of Louisiana's Isle de Jean Charles, a coastal community, they were actually relocated to a different place because the island they were living on, it vanished due to the 90% loss of land mass. And that happened because of the excessive dredging of their canals by the oil and gas companies. And this is also the officially recorded instance of a federally funded project of climate migration, and it was worth 48.3 million USD. Well, if the climate migrants, they are happy or not in their new home, which is 40 miles north from their old home. And the new home is called the New Isle as compared to the old Isle de Jean Charles, where they used to live since time immemorial. It's a question of debate. But I wanted to end my talk with this example so that I could circle back to the point I was making, that why we need to have more indigenous stories related to water migration when we are talking about blue humanities, because it's still, in my personal opinion, severely understudied, and we need to do more research in it. Thank you.